Jim. He's dead.
Welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. And this is part one of my discussion with John Hunter of SAC Comedy Lab. John Hunter has been a part of SAC since their home on Church Street, though then it was as a student himself. He's currently Operations and Educational Director at SAC Comedy Lab and was the Educational Director back when I started teaching classes there as well. And he was instrumental in my growth as an improviser and as a teacher of improv. John is a writer as well as an improvisational actor, and he spent some years in LA plying that trade. John is very comfortable and relaxed on stage and easy to play with. He's super supportive, super accepting, and willing to follow the scene wherever it goes. Welcome to part one of John Hunter's Improv Autopsy. So you are from a southern climate?
Yeah. I was born on an army base in Georgia, actually, but we moved to Tampa when I was very young. And I lived there until 1989 when I moved over to Orlando, Florida, to work for the Mouse, Mickey Mouse, and was in the character department at Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
And that's where I met a personable young man named Wayne Brady.
Oh, nice.
We sort of became friends and hung out some, and he said, you should come see this show that I do downtown. He was an actor. He'd done commercials. He could sing and dance and all that. And I said, "Oh, is it a show? Is it stand up?" He said, "No, it's improv." And I had some familiarity with improv back in the mid '80s. I'd seen on cable the Second City had a big 25th anniversary show. I watched that and I saw all these actors that I'd seen on every sitcom on TV in the '60s and '70s. And I remember thinking, oh, that's where they came from. All right. They studied. They had a place they went to, and they get up and they kind of make it up, and that's pretty cool. And so I had a familiarity with improv, but I went and saw the show with Wayne and the original cast of the Church Street Lab, and I was just blown away. I thought, well, this is great. This is fantastic. I bet I could do this. And they had a drop-in workshop every Monday that Wayne would run. So I dropped in the next Monday. It was open to everyone. Oddly, I don't know if that was the best idea.
Yeah. And
I dropped in, and after about 5 minutes, I thought, oh, I can't do this. Yeah. But Wayne, would explain that there's a philosophy behind it, kind of a method. You don't just stand up there and 7 people go crazy. You're working towards a common goal. So I was able to kind of grasp onto it, and then SAC. It was called the SAC Comedy Lab, and I found out later they were a group of people that had originally started in the Midwest and come to Orlando in the late '80s on an Epcot contract to be the street performers at Epcot, in the UK and Italian pavilions, doing the street shows there. And so by the early 90s, Disney had said, yeah, okay, we see what you do now. We're going to bring it in-house.
Yeah.
And, that's what happens. Even Dave Russell, one of the Comedy Lab's founders and original Epcot guys, he says, yeah, we knew the writing was on the wall at some point. We were getting a nice contract as an outside contractor, but eventually, So some of the performers, went with Disney and became, Disney performers, and some others performers struck out and opened up the Comedy Lab on Church Street in 1991. So, and this is 92, 93 when I began to get involved. And our first teacher, they said, we're going to formalize a set of classes. We're going to have 8 weeks. We're going to meet once a week for 2 hours. It was $60 for the whole class. I remember that. And I was
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, well, again, this is, 93, I think. Yeah.
I'll bleep that out.
Yeah, exactly. Say, woo. Because no one knew. No one knew what improv was. When I first got into it and began taking classes and started the rookie shows. You talk to your relatives and they'd say, well, you told you, oh, I've got a joke for you. Here's a joke for your act.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of explain that no, it's not scripted. There's a bunch of us up there. But now it's just fascinating that improv is it's ubiquitous. People don't need a lot of explanation. A lot of that is thanks to Whose Line, obviously, which is a great a great handle. But yeah, just it was a great start. I was in the first set of classes. Myself and another longtime Sactor, Jay Hopkins, and we hopped in. Our first teacher was Aaron Schur, who was a great teacher. He was one of the performers there. He actually went on to Los Angeles along with a lot of the other original performers, and he became a writer and producer on Everyone Loves Raymond and The Office and a whole lot of other shows. So he had a really nice handle on narrative and concepts. And he had a psychology degree, I believe, so he was very adept at just kind of, reflecting back to you your tendencies, not in a good or bad way, not that, not that this is good or bad, but this is, and he kind of nailed me, it's sort of like you like that power corner upstage right, you observe a lot, you have your arms folded, you've got a very clear sense of the narrative and what should happen, And he said, I would just recommend getting into the fray a bit more, get in danger, get out there, let go a little. And that's what you'll see in any group, right?
Yeah.
In any cast, in any class, certainly. People that are very shy and hesitant and, not wanting to contribute because they don't think it's good. Other people that are determined, they know how it goes. Other people that have an idea and this is the right way, and kind of this melting pot. And that's one of the most enjoyable things about teaching, is just working with the group to sort of begin to overlap those Venn diagrams, and bring out the tendencies. Yeah, that's helpful. And then this is something that's not as useful in this endeavor, but so try this some more. And Aaron was very good at that. And eventually they did start a rookie night, and I was in that first cast.
Do you remember your first show at all?
It's so funny. I don't know if it's the same for other people. It's like a blur for me. It was just madness. It was just, I remember there were 16 of us. And so they
Holy
said
cow.
8 of you will perform in the first half. Like it was a short form competitive improv, that was the overlay. And so 4 on 4, and then at the half we'll switch out and 4 more will, compete. And so we get 16 people. So it was just everyone bum rushing this day. I mean, it was almost exclusively guys, so it's a few brave female performers, but just jumping all over the place and screaming and setting off fire extinguishers. And then in the second half, the performers in the first half, kept crashing the stage and coming from that. So it was just, and I thought, well, they're just going to shut it down. They're going to say, all right, that's enough for rookie night. But it was great. The powers that be there were very patient and said, all right, we'll give you guys a little while to figure this out. And we did settle down. And some of us began migrating to the main stage. And some of the best advice I ever got was in that process. I wanted to move up to the main stage, the weekends as well. And so I came up for a couple of weeks, and I came up with another performer named Chris Blair, very funny guy. And he was just great. He was just a ball of energy and kind of unpredictable, and audiences loved him. And we kind of came up, and so after our sort of trial, one of the Comedy Lab founders, a wonderful person named Claire Sarah, sat down and said, we like what you do. You get improv, you get narrative. It's understanding. It's clear you understand this story and sort of where pieces go and how the games are played. And she said, and Chris is really funny. And then she paused and she said, we can teach Chris the rules. And I got it. It's like, because there's improv theory and then there's performance, right? And if you're going to ask people, an audience for their time and their attention and their money, it has to be entertaining as well. And so basically, and people will say, I want you to, teach me how to be perform, teach me how to be funny. If I knew how to do that, I would be in Los Angeles or New York or somewhere. What we can do is we can work on technique and kind of mechanic stuff, and you can always improve in that. But that innate sense of connection with the audience, and just that sort of charm factor. There's a lot of words for it, but that's something that usually the individual develops on their own. I was fortunate enough to be in a situation where I got a lot of reps, and I also worked on it. I took voice classes, diction classes, music, movement class, other acting classes, camera technique, just things you're building the tool belt to be a performer. Improv, is a huge part of it, but just learning improv technique if you want to be a professional performer, improv performer, that's a part of it. But there's other tools you need as well. I think that's a sort of a phenomenon we encounter a lot. People think, well, I went through these improv classes, I should be good to go. Yeah. So you had a performing background when you came to improv, didn't you? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, a little bit. I majored in theater
Right.
when I was in college. That was my introduction to improv.
Right.
Was there, and then I had been in a little college troupe before I moved to Florida. So
Yeah.
I had that much under my belt anyway before darkening Saks doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let me go back a little bit first. So you said you were in the Tampa area, and what were you doing at Disney? I know you said it was the character department, but what was that? What were you doing?
I was what they called at the time. I was goofy height, which was 5'11" and up, and so those were the character costumes that were bigger. The bears, Brer Bear, Baloo, Little John, and Goofy, Tigger. So the characters that would go out into the park, there were people inside them, and that's where I met Wayne, and that was actually my first introduction. We were sitting crammed in a little narrow staircase, on the side of Cinderella's castle, waiting to go out for a little show that we did twice a day, every day. And I forget what character costume I was in, but Wayne was in Geppetto, and I'd never met him. Geppetto, the character from Pinocchio, and he just turns to me and he says, "Yeah, Geppetto is Italian, right?" I said, yeah, that sounds right. And he goes, "He's probably an emotional guy." I said, "He probably is, yeah." And then he just launches into this amazing monologue, bemoaning the fact that, Pinocchio has left him, just, tearing the hair on his character. You go, "Pinocchio, why you leave me? Oh, I give everything to you. You're dead to me now. I have no son." And I thought, this guy's really funny. I mean, that's a nice take on Geppetto there. And so we would just, talk and kind of exchange ideas back and forth. We had kind of a similar sense of humor. So, when he said, "Hey, I'm doing this show downtown," I was intrigued.
Yeah.
And again, when I saw him up on the stage, and we knew he could sing, we knew he could dance, but to see him just interacting with a group of other people just spontaneously and making funny things happen, and it's like, oh, there's a story. They just made a little story here. How do they know how to do that? Yeah.
So do you not count the character work as performing?
Oh yeah. See, that's the thing. I did come to it with a performance background as well. Not as it was interesting. In a lot of ways, SAC was my theater school in that sense, but I'd worked for an entertainment company in Tampa after I had briefly gone to the University of Florida in my late teens and early 20s, and then the university said it would be best if I continued my studies somewhere else. And so I did. I dropped out and I dug ditches. I said, "Yeah, I don't need college," and I dug ditches and poured cement and washed dishes for a couple of years. And I said, maybe there was something to that college thing. And so I began taking some just classes at USF, and through a family connection started working at an entertainment company as a clown, just doing, grand openings, birthday parties, events. And I was probably the, at the beginning, the stiffest clown, because by nature, I'm a more reserved person. I'm not what you'd really call an extrovert. I enjoy performing, but I really have to charge up to do it,
Yeah.
Whereas some people that is their charge. The performing is how they feed. And so through that process of a couple of years of being a clown and other roles in the entertainment company, sort of whatever they would need, in the days before copyright infringement, I was, the Michelin Tire Man. I dressed up like Superman, all kinds of things for different promotions and store openings. And I also did some commercial work as well. Had an agent and just extra type stuff, background stuff. And we're in a couple of very forgettable theatrical productions as well, and so I was around performers. I picked up things by osmosis, and I observed, and I could get a sense of, all right, if you're in a live performance, this is, these are the things that you do. And then, coming to Disney, just kind of learning that discipline of, hey, now there's a place where you're showing up on time, prepared for something, even if it's in a character costume. You have a set of parameters you're working with, and then if there's a show, there's obviously choreography and timing. And so that kind of builds that muscle of this is a job. I remember one of the key moments just early on for me was at the entertainment company. We were, doing the opening of a video store. You remember video stores? It was little mom and pop.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So it was, some in downtown Tampa, and they had a grand opening, and the local DJ was there. And so the entertainment company I worked for was doing the entertainment. One of the other entertainers was a veteran clown named Martin, and he was great. I mean, he could still walk, juggle flaming batons, make balloon animals super fast, I could make a few rudimentary animals and juggle, a little bit. That was as far as I went.
Yeah.
But, he was a very accomplished performer. And so it's the end of the day, and, it's a video store opening. It's not, the Super Bowl. So by the end of the day, it's kind of, we've been going kind of half hour on, half hour off. So it's around 5 o'clock. There's about 12 people in the parking lot, all the giveaways have been given away. And we're sitting back, so we're getting ready to go out kind of for the last time. And I remember he, kind of gets up and he's suiting back up in his outfit. And he says, showtime. And I kind of chuckled, thinking he was being, sarcastic. And I looked at his face and I realized, he's not. I mean, this is his job. This is the gig. And it kind of hit me of like, you, at a certain point, this isn't a lark for you. Either you're going to commit to it or you're not. And so I kind of thought, I want to commit to this. So it was intriguing to me, and I have to, and I had a thought that I have to give you credit for echoing years later. I don't know if you remember this, but when we met years later was 2005, I think, 2004, 2005, when you were in the Next Generation cast. And I'd just kind of taken over for Richard and was getting to know the cast. And I said, what got you into improv? And you quoted Martin Luther and said, I can do no other. And I thought, wow, okay, that's great. But there is that sense, right, of, I don't know what else I'm going to do. It seems like this is something that I enjoy and maybe have an aptitude for, but it's something I really want to dig into. So I'm familiar with that sensation.
Did you end up doing any other work at the parks other than the character work? Did you ever end up in like any sort of street mow or anything?
That was going on over. They had Comedy Warehouse was just getting up and running, and they had Street Mo, which were both, had a different actor designation. You could see people's faces, they were. And so at that point, I was still intimidated by the thought of just being me, albeit within a character. And so I was, very tempted by auditions. By the time I kind of got my legs under me at SAC and felt pretty confident, Comedy Warehouse was sort of, changing, and Street Mo was as well. And so, sort of that window of, I feel like I could audition now, would kind of come and go. And I also began pursuing some other things as well. I began working with a sports entertainment company called Sports Magic, which was, a lot of live entertainment. We worked sporting events. We were the guys that shot the T-shirts out of the cannon and kind of ran around and, made balloon animals and such, And so I thought, this this is, this is a type of acting. And then the component also too that was key, maybe not as much in Street Mo, but in Comedy Warehouse, was the musical component. The singing ability.
Yeah.
Kind of, they did like, because again, that's a professional show where people paid money to get onto the island. Back then, and they said we need this cast to be able to perform sharp, funny improv and also sing, and move. And that was an aspect I thought I'm not rock solid on that, and so that's another big note that we'll talk with sometimes when people say, hey, I'm really interested in the weekends, I know improv, I've got it. It's like, okay, develop some of those other tools as well. And over the years, I was fortunate enough to have access to, a lot of great teachers, a lot of great workshops that could help with the musical component in terms of you're not a singer, but you can still participate in the musical part of the show. Here's some ways that you can, hook into the music. You can help out the keyboardist, and you can utilize what you have in an entertaining way. That's been one of the things that I've enjoyed the most because I have the least competency at it. And again, it's one of those things that as you do it long enough, you begin to find things that you think, okay, that's a nice little achievement for me. The audience will never notice it. The other cast members will probably never notice it because it's relatively small. But it's like, oh, all right, I was able to link into that song. I was able to hook into that song a little better than I had in the past, and into that musical.
Yeah.
And so, these are all performance aspects that sort of dovetail and play into each other. Again, just that initial, though, just from taking that first drop-in workshop at SAC, the ability to sort of move out from behind a costume of some sort and say, hey,
yeah.
I can get up here on a stage, with other people and interact spontaneously and creatively and confidently.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I mentioned this to Charles Fryman as well, but I feel like improv, there are a lot of introverts in improv. I don't know why that is, because it's one of the scarier forms of theater at the end of the day, but it does seem to draw introverts.
Yeah, and it's, well, I can, having taught so many classes too, we'll see them, different students come, and they'll tell me, I'm shy, I'm really nervous, I'm introverted. I've come to learn, and Dave Russell kind of nailed it. He said, people sort of categorize, introvert is this, cowering little person in the corner, and extroverts is this, people bouncing all over the place. But really, an introvert is someone who just sort of charges up being alone. An extrovert charges up being around people. So it's okay to be an introvert as long, in a group endeavor, as long as that group is, inclusive and non-judgmental. Because then you begin to get the same charge being around people. And I think that's one of the rare things that will happen in an improv class is, I've had people tell me this is the only 3 hours of my week where I can kind of relax around other people, where, I feel like, I can just sort of be myself, for lack of a better word. And that's understandable. I mean, the rest of, not that people are in this, kill or be killed environment all the time, but so much of life is just, having to stop, to assess things, to sort of keep a guard up, to follow a very rigid method for something, for safety and security reasons. There's no gray area. And that's great. Those muscles get good and strong and keep us going and keep us safe. But then it's refreshing to have this period every week where you can just work on those other muscles, that you don't get to use very often. Of just, okay, sure, let's go with that. Here's something. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry if it's stupid because it'll work somehow. We'll make it work.
Okay, so before I get too ahead of myself, so I love that Wayne recruited you to be at SAC because you're the first person. I mean, I didn't know that about you, and I find that terribly intriguing. That's happened because I've you think about some of the people that have been through the lab, or at least from when I came in, there was a few other I guess, generations, if we want to call them
Yeah.
that had been through. And you think about those people, and you think about where they went and kind of wonder how they got connected, but you don't think about the people that they brought in and got connected.
Right. Yeah.
So that's I find that very interesting. So he intrigued you. You brought you, and you saw a show that he was in, and that's kind of what got you hooked and wanting to explore more.
Right.
What was if you have a memory of this? Do you remember the first time something went awry in either a class when you were in a scene or in on stage when you were performing? Does anything stick in your mind after this many performances?
Yeah, it's funny. It is called all kind of a haze. There's dozens and dozens, and I'm sure I'll think of many more later. It's like, I do remember early on, in the lab doing a scene, and there were two performers that were there. And again, we had a rather large cast at first that whittled down, just organically pretty quickly. But there were two performers that were both kind of alpha male performers. They were in a scene with each other, and the scene got contentious, and then it began to have a very contentious energy between these two guys. And I remember sitting on the bench thinking, I hope they don't fight in the scene, because I'm not sure what to do. If like should I make it part of the scene? Should I hop up and break it? How can we, how are we going to be able to, sort of navigate this? And I remember kind of glancing over at the other side of the stage. Again, it was a tiny stage, so kind of looking at the other side of the stage to the other performers that are off to the side, like, hey, we might need to jump in here. And it kind of reached a peak, and fortunately, someone with a much wiser head than I had immediately called a blackout, and so the people on the side sort of hopped up and ushered the two performers off to different sides of the stage. And so I remember it was a very contentious post. But at that point, I remember thinking, well, if they fight each other, at least the audience isn't watching. So it is interesting because I think the ground rules have shifted significantly since then, in terms of, I think, just in the time even I've been teaching the last 20 years or so, that having gone from early on when I started teaching, different people coming in with just wildly varying expectations of what an improv class is.
Yeah.
Some of which are, I remember having to take students kind of aside after the first class and saying, hey, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, It's because of the way you're interacting with the other students, kind of the take you have on things. There might be another creative endeavor that's better suited to that. I remember that happening more often. It didn't happen a lot, but more frequently at 20 years ago, as opposed to now. It's rare that I kind of come across someone where you think, oh, they really are looking to be a stand-up or a monologist or a pro wrestler or, something that's maybe a bit different than what we're going for here. So I think, I'm sure there's troops in the world that still have contentiousness between their members, but yeah, but back then, I think we just had such a disparate cast that some of them really weren't totally clear about what was going on, and just wanted to get up in front of an audience and be a dude, be a funny dude. And so yeah, that was one of those. It's like, how do you manage this? I don't know. Have you ever been in a scene or with a troupe where you thought during a scene, oh, this could go sideways. This could turn into a fight.
Not with each other. There were moments in early show, and if I can find an email address for him, I intend to get in touch with Ian.
Oh yeah.
But there were moments in early show where I didn't know if Ian would maybe meet someone from the audience out in the parking lot after the show. But
yeah.
But it was never between cast members, I don't think. In that instance that you're recalling, do you think it was there too much reality bleeding into the scene, or were they just taking it too personally? What was going on in the scene they were taking personally and as an affront to their own machismo or whatever?
I think that was it. One performer was getting a little more love from the audience than the other, who was used to being sort of the, this is how old I am. example I always used to use when I began teaching in the 90s was John Belushi. It's like, yeah, everyone wants to be John Belushi. The crowd favorite, the wild man, the wild card, but we can't have a show with, all Belushis. Of course, I say that now and people are like, is that the guy from Blues Brothers, or is that The World According to Jim? They don't have a point of reference, though. It's, oh, okay. But yeah, these guys were definitely both Belushi wannabes, and one began getting more laughs, and so the other one began ramping up. Well, here's my shtick, and they got louder and more insistent, and the scene has just gone out the window at this point, and you think, oh man, and here's the thing too. They both self-selected out. I'll give them that. They both kind of realized that, and I don't know what happened to either of them, but if they continued in a creative endeavor, I imagine it was maybe something more solo-oriented or scripted, in terms of. I think now people have a much higher understanding, when coming in of, oh, okay, this is sort of what this is, this is. We certainly had our share too in the early days at Church Street of since it was on a street full of bars of drunks in the audience. We had a pretty adept cast at shutting down hecklers or escorting people out. I mean, the only time I ever thought that we might get in a fight with the audience was actually not improv, but a sketch comedy troupe. I was in with some people I'd met doing improv, including my writing partner Chuck Snyder, who I actually met at Disney. He'd come to SAC with me, and then we were part of a sketch troupe. And we had a sketch show at the Lee Road Comedy Zone. And so that's a stand-up venue. And so we would be there. Gosh, it was an off night, a Tuesday or Wednesday. And, this is an audience that generally is coming in to see stand-up. They know we're not stand-up. It was a rough go. It only lasted 6 months, but it was a rough 6 months, And at one point, there was a group of Shriners, I want to say, in town for a convention. It was some benevolent group. And you would think, well, okay, it's a group of Shriners. They're benevolent, But, these like a lot of these groups, these guys are all older gentlemen. A lot of them, are military vets. A lot of them are, tough, hard asses, I mean, they've, and so, watching our little sketch comedy show, which has some cerebral stuff in it, had some potty humor, but some, they just started heckling, they've been drinking. And so we get to the show, and we're kind of packing up, and again, one of our members, who's kind of a big contentious fellow, began kind of chirping back at them, and so they stood up, and I thought, oh, God damn it, are we gonna get in a fight with the Shriners? It's just, it's just not a good look, calmer heads prevailed, but I just thought, boy, this could be bad, yeah, but it was great, and looking back, I talk with Chuck every now and then, and we just laugh about it, because you're doing one of, well, you can do both, but it's one of two things. Either you're gaining experience, or you're building scar tissue. And it's like, and both are useful. Both are helpful. You're having successes, you're having failures, and you're just learning. You're learning the whole time. So hindsight helps with that. It's no fun in the moment. Perspective is always better.
Yeah. Now, did the almost getting into a fight with the Shriners end up as a sketch later? Because it sounds very sketch worthy to me. I
think it did come back. Actually, in an improv scene, I remember I was just hopped in with a group, and when I was out in Los Angeles, we were down at Santa Monica doing a set, and it was bar prov, but it was a bar that was conducive to improv. That the group had a good standing date there, and for some reason there was they had some props, and during the scene and one of the little props was a Fez hat, and I put it on and just became a drunken Shriner in a scene, and it was great. One of the performers there picked up on it, and got into a mock fight with me on stage and knocked me out, and the audience cheered when the Shriner got knocked out. So I don't know, maybe they've been starting trouble everywhere.
They're known for two things: the tiny cars.
Exactly. Exactly. Great stuff for the kids, but boy.
So what was the sketch group called? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. You'll love this. It was called Echo Sketch. which is the again, dating myself here, the toy from the probably the 50s, but you turn the little dials, little knobs, and you'd sketch something on a, I don't even know what's in an Etch-a-Sketch. I don't know if anyone knows.
I don't either, but it's either radioactive or somehow maybe it's just asbestos.
Yeah, exactly, just pure asbestos. The kids, yeah. So we were called Etch-a-Sketch, and then we also a group of folks, a group of folks from SAC who had been in Next Generation, had moved up to the weekends, performed in the Fringe Festival down there, a sketch group called Contents Under Pressure, and we did a sketch show that was pretty well received, and that was a very enjoyable experience because you're at a Fringe Festival, so the audiences are they're there to see the shows. They're and they're not just working through their 2-drink minimum while they're waiting for the convention to start the next day.
Right. Now, did you do any sketch at SAC, because that was more likely, or SAC did that once upon a time, right?
Well, we did. We had a couple of sketch shows when I was first starting the Next Generation. A couple of the performers there, Matt Young and actually Dan O'Sullivan and Steve Pernick, had started a sketch show called Trendy Britches, and it was sort of open to the SAC casts and performers in the area, and they had a wide net, between the performers at SAC. They knew pretty much every other performer in the Central Florida area at that time. I said, hey, just submit your sketches and we'll look through them and we'll kind of pick some, pick a potpourri, have a nice mix and match. And so one of my friends from Disney had started SAC with Chuck Snyder, and then my other dear friend Jay Hopkins that I met at SAC in my first class, we kind of teamed up together and wrote some sketches and submitted them, and a couple of them got selected. We were so excited to be in the sketch comedy show with these veterans, and that was another huge learning experience, because we'd go through the run through and rehearsal with them, and I got to see a little of their sketch, but then I'd be watching during the show, waiting to go on. And you just see these veteran performers, Paul Vogt among them, who's, done a lot of work on TV and Broadway. Just the timing, the patience, the rapport with the audience, with the material. And you learn a lot by watching too. It's just like, why did they do that? Why does it get that reaction? Okay, when they do, okay. So you're not looking to copy anything, but you're kind of analyzing, and you're also figuring out sort of who you are to the audience, because you know who you want to be, right? I'm a superstar performer that the audience loves, and I do everything great. The audience sort of tells you over time that this is how we see you. And you can fight against it, you can embrace it, you can play with it, there's a lot of things you can do. And so it was instructive to see these are people that really know their persona, they know who they are, and they use it very effectively. And that was a big light bulb moment for me. It's like, oh, okay, so rather than kind of trying to be these different things, and it's like anything. A lot of creative endeavor starts out with just copying someone that you admire. I mean, that's kind of, get you up and running in some ways.
Yeah.
Not everyone does that, obviously, but whether I'm going to try to, write like, Stephen King, I'm going to do a stand-up like Eddie Murphy, I'm going to draw like, my favorite comic book artist. You start there, and then, but at a certain point, you kind of have to figure out, okay, this is who I am. How do I really build on that?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, you've taught many, many more classes than I have, but when I was instructing there at SAC as well, that was something that would come up. It's like, it's fine to try, emulate who you really like on main stage. That's fine, but at some point you need to figure out the kind of improviser you're going to be, and that you are, and inhabit that fully, and that's going to take you further than trying to copy somebody else.
It really will. Authenticity, because the audience loves that. They love that. And they can sense it too. And even 32 years in now, every now and then I'll try something, and it's like something false. It's not false. But one of my things I learned early on is the audience does not want to see me curse on stage. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter how filthy the show is. It doesn't matter the context. It's just, other performers pull it off beautifully, and so every now and then it's just like, all right, and I kind of, and sometimes it'll get a giggle. Most of the time it's just like, huh, okay, it's just they just don't, and it's like, yep, it just checking in still. No, all right, okay, it's just something about, it's like we don't find your cursing funny or engaging, and again, they're not wrong. This is their, this is what they want. So it's every now and then you're just like, let me push it, let me see if I can get away with this. Still no. Okay, all right, good to know.
I can't. Do you curse much in real life?
Oh, I'm terrible. I really am. Obviously not when I'm speaking professionally or on a gig, but I just, and so Gina and I, it ended up that we don't have kids, so it's just us. So we certainly fall into the habits of just speaking, and it's not like I'm ranting around foul mouth nonstop, but just in my internal monologue or talking casually, especially when I'm telling a story, to heighten it humorously. And I'll kind of look back sometimes and think, yeah, you didn't need that many expletives. It's just, part of it's just laziness, I think. And so, but I've been, performing so long, it is just second nature. Kind of when I step out to whatever the venue is, it's almost like, I wouldn't go out there without a shirt on, so I wouldn't, it's just, I don't have to think about it. It's not like, oh gosh, I really gotta watch myself. So it's a distinction I've been able to make pretty easily. I'm sure over the years, a couple of times I might have slipped on stage, kind of, oh, I didn't mean to say that. But by and large, it's so second nature that a lot of that's the Disney training as well. I mean,
sure.
When I'd done character work for a while, but I did become what they called back then a lead, a department lead, which is kind of like a little mini supervisor. You still had to wear, a cheesy shirt and tie and a little bit, but you were basically in charge of getting characters, in and out of the park, on and off set, dispatching parades, steering the floats through, just kind of generally conducting business, the front-facing part of the business. And so you deal with a lot of people. So that's when you really, really get to hone the public speaking voice, where you learn to keep it real concise, real simple. Obviously, no cursing, but it really, in a couple of years of that, it does become second nature, and so that was helpful too. Maybe not so much in short form improv scenes where you're inhabiting characters, but a lot of the events we do where we're doing workshops or seminars, and you're kind of wrangling people. That voice comes in pretty handy.
Now, for the sketch show you did at the lab,
yeah.
When you got in, was it, okay, we like your sketch, you're in this week, or was it, we're going to run this sketch for a few weeks or however many performances, or how did that work?
It was a once a month sketch show. So they say, hey, you're in this month, and then every month you submit a new, and so that was the big, and again, this is before personal computers, so they would call you and say, hey, we like this piece and this piece, and then, if there was a month you didn't get the call, man, it was like, oh, you're crushed, yeah. But then, eventually they ran a best of, and so we had a couple of pieces in that, and that was a lot of fun. And then, not long before I left for Los Angeles in '98, we ran an in-house sketch show, where it was just the cast, and I was a part of that. And some fun sketches in there. It's an interesting thing about sketch, and people say, why don't you guys do more sketch shows? It's just, as you know, it's time intensive. I mean, it's really, there's the time to write it, the time to edit it, the time to get it ready, the time to rehearse it, and you're hopefully involving a lot of high quality performers who they get paid for their time. So it's you're either going to ask a lot of people to commit a lot of time for free, or you're going to need to have a pretty decent budget, which can be stoppers for a couple of reasons.
Did you ever have a sketch that you thought was going to kill and it didn't?
I'm sure I did. I think, I did in the in our Friends show the contents under pressure, and God bless the rest of the cast because they were very patient. And it was like, oh, okay, I really really wanted to do a sketch, and I did do a sketch in the show where I had a big. You ever see those really big pickle jars? You know, they're clear and they're like massive. You know, like a human torso almost.
Yeah.
Well, I had a plastic version of that, and I feel I even saying it right now, I realized I filled it with roaches, and so right away you begin saying, "This already isn't a good idea, John," and so I filled it, and I had and so what I was going to do, because I've always. I grew up in Florida. I just don't have a thing about roaches. Some people, my wife, one of them, just absolutely lose their mind. They don't, but they've gotten on me. They don't bother me that much, I mean, I'll go wash my hands. But a lot of people just have an absolute freak out. So I thought, I'm going to take this big jar of roaches on stage, and I'm going to talk about how misunderstood they are. A very moving monologue that I'd written about how, they're just like us. They have hopes and dreams and feelings, In fact, I'm going to welcome this little guy, into my world, and I was going to take one out and let it crawl on me for a little bit, and then I was going to freak out, and just scream and throw it down and flail around, and then kind of wrap up by saying, well, we just got to kill them all, and I thought, this will be great. And so the rest of the cast said, I don't know, I don't know that it'll hit the way you think it'll hit. I said, oh, no, this will be great. And so first night I did it, and, so it was almost a blackout sketch. I realized later, just by walking, the reaction I got when I walked out with this massive jar, clear jar full of roaches. The audience going, oh, and I thought, you can kind of black it out there. But I did it. I went through the monologue very much. But I realized as I'm doing it, they're not listening to me. They're just staring nervously at this big jar of roaches. And when I unscrewed the lid, I could hear, oh, no. the audience. So there's no enjoyment at all. There's just anxiety and nervousness. And when I reached in and took one out, the low-level shrieking begins, And then when I freak out and drop the jar as I'm flailing, of course, the rest of the roaches get out. And the audience just leaps up and begins to scatter like I yelled fire. And so afterwards, the venue manager says, yeah, you can't release, the building owner says you can't release roaches into the building. And I said, okay, that's a fair point. So I did a very tamed down version of it where I had some live roaches, but I had a plastic one sort of pocketed that I would pull out and pretend it was real and freak out. And so the audience was still anxious, but the fact that I didn't unscrew, and I changed to a big sort of plastic jug that was clear, so I could leave the top on and drop it, and it'd be fine, no roaches could get out. But the audience was more mystified than anything, And I just kept thinking, I'm going to find the right hook for this, and this is going to be great. And afterwards, it's just like, no, John, that was only funny to you. It really was. So you live and you learn, and you kind of work with people you trust. And if they're saying, I don't know that's going to hit the way, you might want to take it in a little more.
Well, and that's the one of the things about sketch, and I mean, for Fringe, you get more than one performance. Yeah. You have to do more than one performance. But when I hear talk about, let's do a sketch or let's do some sketch, I think it's just about Second City and their process, and their process allows them to really vet and figure out what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And it's real hard to do that unless you have a run where you can work out the kinks kind of as you're going. Exactly. Because even rehearsing ahead of time, you don't know how it's going to be in front of an audience. Exactly, yeah. I mean, there's just no replacement for reps, It's just like that. That's, with anything, sketch, improv, just reps are the best thing you can get. And, it's just, and again, all the process, right? Just building scar tissue. Now, SAC used to do, even before early show, there was some long form in SAC's history, right? Or some experimental theater?
Yeah, they would try different kind of some different improv forms. Kind of, they just called it open or open jams sometimes. A couple of the ensemble in the early days who were kind of part time, but some old Epcot performers and were actually from Chicago City Limits, which was a New York City improv troupe that was sort of long form based, and so I remember in some of the just because we had 7:30, 9:30, 11:30 shows, so a lot of times the 11:30 show is like, all right, just open format, open night, and some of those performers I remember would do longer pieces. And I would just sit on the side. They didn't do Herald per se, but they did do longer scenes that would kind of wrap around, that were very satisfying for the audience. And it didn't get the kind of gut laugh, bang 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 of the short form game, which again, looking back, it's amazing. We did 3 shows a night, and this was they were 90-minute shows, but I remember we didn't have any kind of slice of life or any kind of audience. So we'd have, 6 scenes in each half. So you would, and the beautiful thing about that was in the 7:30 and 9:30, that's a total of 12. We'd have 6 scenes, in each half. So you'd have 24 scenes in those first 2 shows. Of those 24. You get to experiment. You get to go, okay, this is seen with a spec. This is backwards. A couple that are just going to fail. And back then we threw the pink shoe to immediately end the scene. And you just move on, because you had so many. There wasn't this kind of pressure to every one of these has to hit. So at the 11:30 show, sometimes the crowd was a bit more laid back, and it's like, oh, let's take them. And I remember I was, present for those shows. I was in the cast, but I was more watching because it was a more patient type of long form. And I, and again, wasn't even familiar with the Herald or any of those formats, but just understanding that, oh, all right, this is, a little bit longer take. And then I remember, and this to me really kind of brought home, though, sort of the difference between short form and long form, and just the gaminess of short form. But I remember we had a Thursday show at 9:30, and one of my good friends, Stuart Maxwell, was a very experienced theatrical performer, really good all around, just good at everything, and very intrigued by, we'd all read the stories of Second City and, IO's early days, kind of the theater for the people, and it's sort of like, okay, and Stuart was very intrigued by that, so we had a regular 9:30 show for a while on Thursdays, called, I forget what it was called, something like The Newspaper. But basically, Stuart would have a newspaper on stage. This is back in the days of newspapers. But he would ask the audience, what's on your mind? And we're going to kind of, create scenes about that. Comedic scenes, but still got the paper there. And I remember we did this for a couple of months. And what was invariably on the audience's mind in Central Florida in the 90s was, make us laugh, do something funny. Do a funny celebrity imitation, sing a funny song, do a funny scene. It's like, there is an appetite for, the cerebral. Yeah, let's explore social issues through improv. It's not a big audience where, in a lot of places. And the bigger audience is in, hey, be funny, make us laugh. So I think, sometimes there's this kind of back and forth about, which one. There's no better or worse or, right or wrong in any of this. It's just figuring out what do you want to do, and if you say, I want to have a big thriving business with a lot of steady income and a steady audience, you got to figure out what the bigger, what the mass of the audience is gravitating towards. All right. But also, if you say, I want to do something that's satisfying and money is not as much of a concern. Oh, okay. Well, let's do something where we dive deeper. Or we can do that, but we have food and drink. We have a bar license. That something to buttress you, right? Yeah, because you gotta keep the doors open. So I just remember kind of during those newspaper shows going, okay, well, this is sure, this is what they like, this is what they want. Be funny. So Yeah.
I feel like if you're trying to do serious drama, improvised drama, I feel like you're really kind of going against the natural grain. I've always felt like improv is that comedy is kind of a byproduct of improv.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're trying for it, sometimes you miss it. But if you're just up there doing improv, it's going to be funny. So if you're trying to do dramatic improv in a performance type situation, I feel like you have to fight some instincts
Oh, yeah.
that are good instincts
Yeah.
because and also the audience is going to laugh because they
Yes.
know it's made up and because everything's happening right then in the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not talking about like applied or, some of the times when you're like really like therapy kind
Oh,
of situation
yeah.
or, that kind of stuff is easier to be serious because of the context. But in a performance context, I think it's tough to try to do something that's dramatic or serious because improv leads to comedy just kind of naturally.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a great point. That's something we talk about a lot, in class and also in seminars, is that it oddly applies to sales in a way. People say, okay, a bunch of improv comedians going to come in and tell me about my business. But something we have found over the years is exactly what you just said. If we go on stage trying to be funny, you're going to get 5 or 6 people just doing monologues and stepping on each other, and it'll be amusing. It's not inherently satisfying. If we go on stage with the intent to kind of connect with each other and really just kind of grab onto everything, in a very highly entertaining way, but really connect, the comedy will inevitably result. And it's the same thing with sales a lot. I've been involved a little with sales, and Gina can attest to this because she's our sales director. If you go into an interaction with a client focused on the sale, you're going to miss a lot of times. If you go in kind of focused on connecting to that client, often, many times, a sale will result. And so it's just sort of kind of, getting out of your own way and what are you focusing on, and like you said, so just the byproduct of genuine human interaction, and again, with a handle on it, speaking alphabetically or what have you, comedy results. And if you're trying to play it seriously, it's almost like at a solemn occasion, something very solemn and sad, and all of a sudden, you think, I'm going to start giggling. There's a demon in your head, that said. And so, I'm certain it's done. I'm certain it can be done, like you said. But outside of therapeutic situations or something where, hey, we know that this is this dedicated time and space for this show to be dramatic, it's inherently going to be interesting, entertaining.
Yeah. And I think that at the end of the day, for me, if I have to choose between being funny and being pretentious, I'll choose funny.
Oh yeah, because people enjoy it, and it's a good feeling. It's inclusive. We try to work at the top of our intelligence, and just basically create a really fun in our show. Create a fun experience for people to come see, and it is interesting too because it's one of those things that you guys should have. We had a YouTube channel briefly. We had things up and down, but it's one of those mediums. It really is that it's just the live version of it. I mean, thank God for Whose Line, because that gave us a reference point for the world,
Yeah.
And it's very funny and it's fun to watch. But Wayne invited me to do a couple of tapings. It's 3.5 hours of taping to get to 23 minutes.
Right.
And it's all fascinating stuff to me, and it's all fun and interesting. But it's also a lot of, okay, all right, cut it off there. That didn't work. Move along, just to get to the good stuff. But it just really live is, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you're first starting improv and you're so excited about this scene and you want to tell your friends about it. And you start telling your friend about this improv scene and you realize it's like telling someone about a dream. It's like, to you, it's very vivid and real. And they're going to nod and say, oh, yeah, okay. And you're like, no, you don't understand. The talking giraffe. I mean, it was so funny, and so it's kind of one of the few things around right now that you really need to experience live. And some people with varying degrees of success have kind of cracked the code on screen improv, and God bless. It's in its best form, I think. It's like, people, you want to be there.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think, I mean, even things that I see online or YouTube that I think are done well and that I laugh at, I know would have been even better in person.
Yeah.
There's just something about if SNL was a scripted show, I don't think it would still be on the air. Part of the allure is that it's live and things can go wrong. And with improv, it's the same way. Being in that room with everybody, knowing that everything is being made up and that things could, who knows what's going to happen? Things could go wrong at any moment, and things could go way off the rails. Is really a magical thing. It can't be replicated in your living room.
Yeah.
My dog is howling. I don't know if that's being picked up on the microphone.
Oh, I thought it was music. I was like, oh, okay. Is this the Academy? Is it Stephen being played off? It's kind of like,
No,
is your dog okay? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, okay. He may be asleep. He does that sometimes in his sleep. But in case anyone heard that and wondered what it was, that was our basset hound.
Oh, God bless. Yeah.
He's agreeing with me. I know it.
Okay.
I can sense it.
Perfect. Good. Smart dog.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with John Hunter. Come back for part 2 and we'll talk more about John's improv journey and he'll answer my Proust questionnaire. If there's someone you think I should interview, or if you'd like to get in touch with me or any of my guests and you can't find contact information elsewhere, drop me a line at improvbrain@gmail.com or check the show notes. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.